ever since I was diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. 3 years ago, no one in my family had smiled. My dad, David, was always on the go after his office job. He'd pick up odd shifts on construction sites to save money for my treatment. My mom, Sarah, not only took care of me, but also went to the hospital every day to look after my grandma, who was paralyzed. My 5-year-old sister, Chloe, already did most of the chores at home and always watched my mood nervously. Today was Chloe's 6th birthday. I started taking my medication on time a week ago, hoping to be in good spirits to celebrate her birthday. But the moment Mom brought out the cake, my head suddenly began to throb intensely. It was the warning sign of an alter switch. I tugged at Mom's sleeve, telling her I felt terrible. My usually gentle mom suddenly slapped me hard and locked me in the bathroom. "You feel so bad? Then just die. Have I not been good to you? Why do you have to steal Chloe's attention at a time like this? You're crazy. You're a lunatic." Mom screamed hysterically at me, slamming the bathroom door shut. The moment she closed the door, the alter switch began. The part of me that was desperate to die, my alter one, finally took control. I was like an observer, only able to watch as one controlled my body. For the past 3 years, every time one took over, my body would try to die in various ways. Jumping from a window, that was when I was 8, climbed onto the balcony, while Mom and Dad were at the hospital with Grandma. Luckily, Dad came home early and grabbed me, but he fell to the ground, spraining his ankle, and couldn't get out of bed for half a month, cutting my wrist. That was last winter. One found a piece of broken glass and made a gash on my wrist. When Mom found me, she cried hysterically, rushing me to the hospital that very night, and stayed by my bedside for 3 days and 3 nights, without closing her eyes. Drowning. That was in the bathtub. One filled it with water and submerged my head. Chloe noticed something was wrong and frantically called Mom, which saved me. One had tried most ways to commit suicide, but my parents always managed to save me. When I opened my eyes, I would often see my parents and Chloe's tear-streaked faces. "Lily, I'm begging you. Please don't try to die again. Are you going to harm our whole family until you're satisfied? Are you okay? Hey, Dad and Mom are so worried about you." From then on, every time I felt an alter switch coming, I would take a lot of medication to stay normal, even if the pills made me dizzy and nauseous. I didn't want to see my family's tears again. But this time, I had no more medication. One could finally fulfill his wish. One looked at the eyebrow razor on the vanity, carefully tucking it away. In my mind, I screamed and struggled, trying to regain control of my body. But one's strength was too great. I was trapped like in a cage, unable to do anything. Outside, Dad's confused voice suddenly came through. "Sarah, where's Lily? Isn't she coming to celebrate Chloe's birthday?" Mom's voice, almost breaking, full of long, suppressed resentment, answered, "She's pretending to be sick again. Usually I'd let it slide, but today is Chloe's birthday. I don't want Chloe's birthday to be ruined again. She's never had a proper birthday." Dad sighed, his voice full of weariness. Told Mom, "Let her cool off. Then her temper needs to be curbed. You and I will celebrate Chloe's birthday. The child has never had a proper birthday since she was little. Let's not disappoint her again." One laughed at me mockingly in my mind. "See me? Mom and Dad don't love us anymore. Why should we live after that incident? I told you death is the only escape, but you insisted on enduring for the family until now. Is this the result you wanted?" I wanted to deny him. Mom and Dad clearly loved me. They had sacrificed almost everything for me. But then I remembered Dad's shoulder injury, Mom's dark circles under her eyes, and Chloe's ingratiating smile. To pay for my therapy fees, Dad often worked on construction sites until his lower back gave out. And on rainy days, and would almost keep him from getting out of bed. Mom had to take care of Grandma and then come back to care for me, her sick child. She only slept 3 or 4 hours a day to avoid upsetting me. Chloe was always well-behaved and gentle around me. Even at just 5 years old, she'd learned to wash dishes and do chores. If I died, maybe everyone would be happier. I gave up struggling, letting one turn on the faucet, fill the tub with hot water, and then climb in. Without a moment of hesitation, one used the eyebrow razor to cut my wrist. The wound was deep enough to see bone, and blood instantly flowed out. The water in the tub gradually turned crimson, and my soul felt lighter. This was finally coming to an end. Dad wouldn't have to put on pain patches every night. He could get a good night's sleep. Mom wouldn't have to rush around every day taking me to doctors. Chloe could finally have a normal childhood. My family would finally be free of me, this lunatic. In the last moment before my consciousness completely faded, my original personality switched back. Looking towards the door, I whispered my last words. "Mom, Dad, Chloe,
I'm sorry.
If there's a next life, I'll never be a burden to you again. When I opened my eyes again, I was floating near the dining table at home. Dad was covering Chloe's eyes, and Mom carefully carried a fruitcake. Happy 6th birthday to our darling Chloe. Chloe opened her eyes and smiled in surprise. Mom, Dad, I've never seen such a beautiful cake. My eyes welled up instantly. Chloe was still young when I got sick. Because of me, she'd never had a proper birthday growing up. Every birthday, I would have an episode, then be rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. Mom and Dad had no time to spare for her. Come to think of it, this might be the first time Chloe had ever seen a cake. Mom turned her head to wipe away a tear, then cut Chloe a large slice of cake. Eat more if you like it, Chloe. But Chloe took the cake and ran straight to the bathroom. She raised her hand and gently knocked on the door, whispering, "Come out and eat cake, Lily. I remember you love sweets the most." I wrapped my arms around her small body, wanting to tell her, "I'm sorry, Chloe. I can't eat cake anymore. It's my fault. I brought bad luck to your birthday." But my hand passed right through her body, unable to touch anything. Chloe didn't get a response for a long time. She walked back dejectedly. "Mom, is Lily mad? She won't talk to me." Mom hugged her, a hint of anger in her voice. "Don't mind her. She just loves to act up and pretend. Haven't we always saved her from suicide attempts? This time must be fake too. Today is your birthday. Don't worry about her." As Mom spoke, she caught sight of the food Chloe had saved for me on the table. It was food Chloe had specifically asked Mom to make extra for me. Her temper flared up again. She swept the plate of food into the trash can with a clang, and the plate shattered on the floor. If she doesn't eat, she doesn't eat. Don't let her act like everyone owes her something every day. Haven't we sacrificed enough already? I wanted to shout at her. Mom, I wasn't pretending. I was in so much pain and misery every day, with two voices constantly fighting in my head. I only lived this long for you. I know you sacrificed a lot. That's why I died. So you wouldn't have to sacrifice anymore. Chloe looked anxious and flustered, contradicting Mom. Mom, don't talk about Lily like that. She's just sick. She's always so nice to me. Dad patted Chloe's back and told her, "Chloe, your sister can be quite selfish sometimes. She's always thinking about how miserable she is, never caring about what the rest of the family thinks. Mom and Dad work so hard to earn money, but Lily just stays immersed in her own world all day. Mom and Dad are so tired they can barely straighten their backs, but she just keeps trying to kill herself." He seemed to have forgotten that I was just a 10-year-old child, floating in the air. I looked incredulously at Dad, the dad who used to dote on me the most. When I was 7, Mom and Dad left me to play at a neighbor's house. But then neighbor's elderly relative did something terrible to me. During those most painful days, my body activated a protective mechanism. Whenever I thought about that day, my consciousness would blur, and one would emerge to re-experience those scenes over and over again. Since then, I developed dissociative identity disorder, and one's constant desire to die stemmed from that very reason. Dad had knelt beside me back then, crying and saying he was sorry, promising to take care of me for life. "Dad, didn't you say you'd love me forever?" Even though I was now a spirit, my heart still ached. Their guilt and love had been worn away by daily exhaust, leaving only impatience and resentment. I became the sinner who burned the whole family. I kept Mom and Dad tied down to me every day. My pain in their eyes had become an act, a show. Even my death became I means to gain some. Mom angrily pushed Dad, her voice filled with a mix of anger and pain. "What are you saying? Lily might be a bit delicate, but she's a poor child too." As she spoke, Mom's eyes reddened. She was only 7 back then, and that old pervert. My heart aches. I wanted to tear that bastard apart. Later, Lily kept trying to die. I knew she was hurting inside. But today is Chloe's birthday. We can't let her act out. Mom wiped away her tears and lovingly stroked Chloe's head. "Wait. You didn't make a wish when you went to get Lily the cake. Make one now." Chloe's childlike face lit up with joy. She closed her eyes and made a sincere wish. Chloe wants to be with Mom, Dad, and Lily forever. This sentence pierced Mom's heart like a needle. Mom suddenly covered her mouth and rushed into the bedroom. I faintly heard her muffled sobs. In those sobs, there was guilt, heart fake, and an indescribable helplessness. Dad's eyes also reddened. He silently put a crown on Chloe's head and stroked her hair. "Dad promises you our family will always be together." I hugged Dad and Chloe, thinking silently to myself, "I'm sorry, Chloe. Your wish can never come true. But without me, you, Mom and Dad will be happier. No more worrying about medical bills. No more living in fear. No more living such a tired life." Tucking Chloe into bed, Dad gently called my name from the bathroom door. "Lily, please come out. It's cold in there." Come out, and Dad will make you dinner. Don't you love Dad's steak the most? Dad will make you a big plate just for you. But the only answer was dead silence.
Dad, I'm okay.
Lily can't feel the cold anymore? I can't eat your steak either. Seeing that I didn't make a sound, Dad went back to the bedroom and quietly asked Mom, "Why did you lock Lily in the bathroom for so long? Her mental state is unstable. Maybe we should go check on her." Mom was silent for a moment, then shook her head. "I didn't even lock the door. She can come out whenever she wants. There's only an eyebrow razor in the bathroom. How much force would she need to cut her wrist? She's just a kid. She wouldn't do it. Lily is sick, but we've also spoiled her a bit too much. Think about it herself." I stomped my feet in frustration, wanting so badly to tell Mom that I really did cut my wrist with that eyebrow razor. And I wasn't spoiled one, did it? I was Mom's good child. Dad finally sighed, no longer insisting. He started discussing the month's expenses with Mom. This month, my therapy with a private specialist cost almost $10,000, and Grandma's medical bills at the hospital were astronomical. Mom covered her face, her sobs escaping her throat in low bursts. When will this life end? Lily still can't go to school normally. We'll have to support her for life. I'm afraid we won't be able to bear it. Dad patted Mom's hand and pulled her into a hug, comforting her. Since we brought her into this world, we have to be responsible, no matter what. Lily is our child. We didn't protect her well, so supporting her life is fine. After I finish my shifts at the construction site, I'll drive for Uber to earn more money. We have to cure Lily, and things will slowly get better. I looked at Dad's gray temples and Mom's tears, and suddenly felt that I shouldn't have died. Mom and Dad had already included my life in their future. They had planned to support me for life. Mom and Dad loved me after all. I reached out to wipe away Mom's tears, but my hand passed through her. "Mom, don't cry." We left quietly on our own. "You won't have to worry about me anymore." That night, Dad stayed up half the night in the living room, constantly glancing towards the bathroom, hoping I would come out. Mom tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep all night. By dawn, the dark circles under her eyes were even heavier. I floated beside them, watching over them all night. My heart, a mix of sorrow and bitterness, filled with unspeakable guilt. As dawn just broke, a faint clatter of dishes and forks came from the kitchen. Mom, with bloodshot eyes, stood in front of the stove, making breakfast. It was my favorite bacon and eggs. When I was little and sick, Mom always made this to cheer me up. But since I got sick, Mom hadn't made it for me in a long time. She made it with extra care. 2 strips of bacon, 1 egg, just the way I'd mentioned wanting it so many times. It smelled so good. I wished I could eat Mom's cooking, but I never would again. Carrying a plate of bacon and eggs to the bathroom door, Mom's voice was hoarse, tinged with compromise. "Stop acting up. Mom made you bacon and eggs. It's hot. Come out and eat before you take your medicine. Yesterday, Mom was wrong. I shouldn't have hit you, shouldn't have said harsh words. Chloe is waiting to play with you. Come out. Let's be good." Inside the door there was dead silence. Not even a breath. Mom's patience ran out. Her brows furrowed and her tone hardened. "Lily, don't be ungrateful. Do you think pretending to be dead will get you sympathy? Haven't we suffered enough for you? Come out now, or I'll dump this food out and starve you for a day." She waited for a moment, only the faint sound of whined through the door crack. This child is really disobedient after making her food. I still have to take Chloe to kindergarten and go to the hospital to take care of Grandma. Mom muttered to herself. Just as she was about to turn around, a dull thud came from the living room, immediately followed by Dad's muffled groan. "Sarah, my chest hurts." Mom's face changed drastically. She dropped the plate with a clatter at the door and rushed out. I floated over to see Dad, clutching his chest, squatting on the floor. His face was pale, and his forehead was covered in cold sweat. I was frantic, but I couldn't help it all. "David, what's wrong?" Mom's voice trembled with panic as she rushed to help him. Dad swayed, almost falling. His fingers dug desperately into his chest.
"Pain.
Can't breathe." Mom screamed for Chloe like crazy. "Chloe, quickly, call the neighbors. Call 911. Hurry." Chloe, terrified, cried, and stumbled out to knock on the neighbor's door. The neighbors quickly arrived, helping Dad and frantically dialing 911. Mom stayed by Dad's side, tears streaming down her face. But she forced herself to remain calm. She pulled out her phone, wanting to call a contact at the hospital first, but her hand was shaking too much to dial accurately. She kept muttering, "Don't let anything happen. Please don't let anything happen. We still have to raise Lily and Chloe. You can't be gone." Within minutes, the ambulance sirens wailed closer. Paramedics rushed in with a stretcher. quickly checking Dad's blood pressure and attaching electrodes. Preliminary diagnosis is acute arrhythmia caused by long-term overwork. He needs to be taken to the hospital immediately. Hearing that, my heart felt like it was being tightly squeezed by a hand. It's all my fault. If it weren't for earning money for my treatment, Dad wouldn't be working 2 jobs every day. He wouldn't be sick. Even in death, I'm still causing them trouble. I'm such a useless child. The paramedics quickly loaded Dad onto the stretcher and pushed him out, stumbled, wanting to follow, but then looked back towards the bathroom. She paused, her mind a mix of urgency and confusion. On one side was her critically ill husband, on the other, her sulking daughter. She gritted her teeth, asked the neighbors to help look after Dad, and turned to run back home. She still couldn't stop worrying about me. Afraid I was hungry, afraid something really happened. Even though she was angry with me just moments ago, what she worried about most was still me. When she got home, it was already bright. Chloe was squatting by the bathroom door. Seeing Mom returned, she immediately rushed over. Her small hands tightly clutched Mom's clothes. Her voice choked with tears. "Mom." Lily fell asleep in the bathtub. I called her so many times, but she won't wake up. No matter how much I call, she listens to you the most.
Mom.
Please make her wake up and eat birthday cake with. Mom froze. The blood drained from her face so completely that her skin looked like parchment. For a second, the world seemed to stop spinning. The clatter of the dropped plate, the distant wail of the ambulance carrying Dad away, the morning sunlight filtering through the hallway window, everything muted into a deafening, terrifying silence. "Asleep?" Mom whispered, her voice barely leaving her throat. She pushed past Chloe, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. I floated behind her, my ethereal chest tight with a panic I could no longer physically feel.
Don't look, Mom. Please don't look.
Mom's hand hit the bathroom door, pushing it wide open. The air inside was thick with the metallic, undeniable stench of copper, mixed with a faint, sweet scent of Chloe's birthday cake lingering from the night before. The bathtub was overflowing slightly, silent streams of water trickling onto the white tile floor. But the water wasn't clear. It was a deep, murky crimson. My body lay submerged beneath the red surface. My head was tilted back against the porcelain, my eyes closed, skin a terrible, translucent gray. My right arm dangled outside the tub, blood pooling on the bath mat from the deep, jagged gash on my wrist. The small eyebrow razor lay discarded by the drain. Mom didn't scream. Not at first. Her legs simply gave out. She collapsed onto the wet tile, her knees hitting the floor with a hard, sickening crack. She crawled toward the tub, her hands trembling violently as she reached into the cold, red water. She grabbed my shoulders and pulled my heavy, lifeless body up, cradling my wet head against her chest. "Lily," she gasped, her breath hitching in rapid, shallow bursts. "Lily, baby. Wake up. Stop playing. Please stop playing." She slapped my cheek, just like she had yesterday when she was angry, but this time her touch was desperate, terrified. She pressed her fingers to my neck, searching for a pulse that had stopped hours ago.
Oh, God.
Oh my God.
No.
The scream that finally tore from her throat was inhuman. It was the sound of a soul being ripped in half. It echoed off the bathroom walls, shrill and agonizing. She rocked my body back and forth, smearing my blood all over her white sweater, sobbing so hard she began to choke. Chloe stood in the doorway, her small hands covering her mouth, her wide eyes reflecting a horror no 6-year-old should ever witness. She didn't cry. She just stared at the red water, shivering violently. "Chloe, call 911. Mom shrieked, her voice cracking. "Call them again. Tell them to come back. Tell them my baby is hurt." But Chloe couldn't move. She was paralyzed. I drifted down, kneeling beside Mom, wrapping my transparent arms around her shaking shoulders. "Mom, I'm sorry," I sobbed, though I shed no tears. "I didn't want this. It was one. He was too strong. I'm so sorry." Mom couldn't hear me. She desperately tried to wrap a towel around my wrist, pressing her hands against the wound, oblivious to the fact that the bleeding had stopped long ago. Minutes later, the police and a second ambulance arrived. The house was swarming with heavy boots and radios. They pulled Mom away from me. It took 2 officers to hold her back as she thrashed and screamed my name, her hands stained red. A paramedic knelt by the tub, checked my pupils, and touched my cold neck. He looked up at his partner and gave a slow, grim shake of his head. "Time of death, approximately 1 a.m., he muttered, pulling a white sheet over my face. Mom collapsed into the arms of a police officer, a long, hollow wail tearing from her lips before her eyes rolled back, and she passed out completely. The hospital waiting room was a sterile, glaring white. It was a cruel twist of fate that Mom woke up in a cot just 2 floors below where Dad was recovering from emergency stent surgery. The doctor said Dad had suffered a severe myocardial infarction, a massive heart attack brought on by chronic stress and physical exhaustion. He survived, but his heart was permanently damaged. When Mom finally regained consciousness, the reality of what had happened hit her all over again. She didn't scream this time. She just lay there, staring blankly at the ceiling, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes and soaking into her hair. I sat in the chair beside her, keeping a silent vigil. A grief counselor and a doctor came in. They spoke in soft, measured tones, asking if she was ready to see her husband. They warned her that David's heart was fragile, that any severe emotional shock could trigger another cardiac event. Mom slowly sat up. She looked 10 years older than she had the day before. The dark circles under her eyes were bruised and heavy. "I have to tell him," she whispered. "I have to tell my husband." I followed her down the quiet corridors to the cardiac care unit. Dad was lying in a hospital bed, hooked up to an array of monitors that beeped in a steady, rhythmic rhythm. He looked frail, his skin pale, and his lips dry. When Mom walked in, his eyes fluttered open. A weak, tired smile touched his face. "Sarah," he rasped, his hand reaching out for hers.
I'm sorry.
"I scared you." Mom took his hand, her own trembling violently. She tried to smile back, but her face crumpled. She dropped to her knees beside his bed, pressing her forehead against his knuckles, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Dad's smile vanished. His eyes darted around the room, then looked at the doorway. "Where's Chloe? Who's watching the girls?" He paused, his brow furrowing. "Where's Lily? Is she still locked in the bathroom?" The monitors attached to Dad began to beep a little faster. Mom lifted her head. Her face was a mask of sheer agony. "David." She choked out. "David, she's gone." Dad stared at her, uncomprehending. "Gone? Did she run away?" "Sarah, you need to call the police. She's sick. She can't be out there alone." "No, David." Mom squeezed his hand, her voice breaking into a gut-wrenching sob.
She's dead.
"Our baby is dead." The steady rhythm of the heart monitor spiked into a chaotic, rapid alarm. Dad's eyes widened, the breath leaving his lungs in a sharp hiss. He tried to sit up, but the wires pulled him back. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice trembling with rising panic. "She was just in the bathroom. I asked her to come out. I told her I'd make her steak. She cut her wrists." Mom wept, burying her face in his blankets. "She did it last night, while we were arguing about money. While we left her in the cold. She's gone, David." Dad fell back against the pillows. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The monitor wailed, and nurses rushed into the room, pushing Mom aside to administer a sedative to Dad. As the drugs took hold, pulling him under, a single tear tracked down Dad's weathered, graying cheek. "My fault," he whispered into the oxygen mask before his eyes closed. "I left her in the cold."
No.
I screamed, floating over him, trying to grab his face.
No, Dad.
"It wasn't you. You loved me. You worked so hard for me. Please don't blame yourself." But my words dissolved into the sterile air. They couldn't hear me. My death, the one thing I thought would set them free, had only locked them in a prison of unbearable guilt. The funeral was small. Just Mom, Dad, Grandma in her wheelchair, a few neighbors, and Chloe. Dad was discharged from the hospital just a day prior, against medical advice. He sat in a folding chair by the small, white casket, staring at the polished wood with hollow, sunken eyes. He had aged decades in a matter of days. He breathed heavily, leaning heavily on a cane, his hand resting on the casket lid as if trying to feel my warmth through the wood. Mom held Chloe. Chloe wore a black dress, clutching a small, squashed piece of plastic wrap in her hand. It was a slice of her birthday cake. She hadn't eaten it. She had saved it for me. As the priest said his prayers, talking about heaven and angels, I looked at my family. The heavy chains of medical bills and exhaustion had been replaced by a much heavier, darker chain: grief. When it was over, and the neighbors offered their awkward condolences and left, the 4 of them lingered by the grave. Mom knelt down, resting her forehead against the fresh earth. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice entirely stripped of emotion, leaving only a vast, empty wasteland. "I slapped you. The last thing I did was slap you and call you crazy. I was so angry. I was just so tired, Lily. But I didn't mean it. I would take it back. I would take back every word if you would just breathe again." Dad stepped forward and gently helped Mom up. He didn't say a word. He just stared at the dirt, a man utterly broken. They returned to the house. The silence inside was suffocating. The bathroom door was closed. Mom had hired a cleaning crew while Dad was in the hospital, but neither of them could bring themselves to look at that room. A few days later, while packing up my bedroom, Dad found it. I had hidden it between the mattress and the box spring. It was a small blue notebook. My diary. The one my therapist told me to write in to help separate my thoughts from one's. Dad sat on the edge of my bed, turning the pages with trembling fingers. Mom walked in, carrying an empty cardboard box, and stopped when she saw him crying. She set the box down and sat beside him. Together, they read my final entry, written the afternoon of Chloe's birthday, just before the headache started. March 5th. I took my pills today. They make my stomach hurt, but I want to be good for Chloe's birthday. I love Chloe. I love Mom and Dad. I know they are tired. Dad's back hurts so much he cries when he thinks I'm asleep. Mom's hair is falling out from stress. I hear them talking about money. I hate that I am sick. I hate the monster in my head. One is loud today. He says they hate me. He says they wish I was dead. But I know he's lying. They saved me from the window. They saved me from the water. They love me. I am going to fight him. I have to fight him so Dad doesn't have to work in the rain anymore, and Mom can sleep. If I lose, if one takes over. I want them to know it wasn't me. It was the sickness. Lily loves them. Lily will always love them. The notebook slipped from Dad's hands, hitting the floor with a soft thud. He leaned forward, burying his face in his hands, letting out a raw, agonizing sob that shook his entire fragile frame. Mom grabbed the notebook, pulling it to her chest, rocking back and forth as she wailed. She fought. Mom cried, her voice tearing. She fought him for us. And I locked her in the dark. I pushed her to him. We failed her. Dad wept, his fingers digging into his scalp. I promised her I'd protect her forever. I promised her when she was 7 years old, and I let her die thinking she was a burden. I stood in the center of the bedroom, my spectral heart breaking into a million jagged pieces. I rushed to them, throwing my arms around them both, trying to project every ounce of warmth and love I had into their souls. You didn't fail me, I shouted, though the room remained silent. You gave me 10 years. You gave me so much love. Please stop hurting. Please. Months bled into a cold, relentless winter. My death did not bring the relief I had naively hoped for. It brought a slow, agonizing decay to the family I loved so desperately. Dad couldn't go back to the construction site. His heart condition worsened, exacerbated by his refusal to eat properly or sleep. He spent his days sitting in the armchair in the living room, staring blankly at the TV without turning it on. The Uber driving he had planned to do never happened. They lived off disability checks and Grandma's meager pension. Mom quit her job to take care of Dad and Grandma full-time. She moved through the house like a ghost, hollow and mechanical. She stopped smiling. She stopped brushing her hair. She rarely spoke, save for when she had to remind Dad to take his heart medication. But the worst was Chloe, my bright, cheerful 5-year-old sister, who had just turned 6 on the worst day of our lives, began to fade. She stopped talking at school. She stopped playing with her toys. Every night at dinner, she would quietly take a portion of her food and slide it onto a small plate, placing it at the empty seat beside her. Mom and Dad never had the heart to clear it away until she was asleep. One evening, I watched Chloe drag a stepping stool into the bathroom. She stood in front of the sink, staring at the mirror. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a red crayon. Slowly, carefully, she drew a jagged red line across her own left wrist. My ghostly breath caught in my throat. Chloe stared at the red line, her lower lip trembling. Lily, she whispered to the empty room. If I go to sleep in the water like you, will Mom and Dad look at me again? Will you come play with me?
No.
The realization hit me with the force of a freight train. My sacrifice hadn't saved them. It had planted a seed of the very same darkness that had consumed me. The trauma of my death was creating a new monster in Chloe's mind. I couldn't leave. I couldn't cross over. The tether that kept me in this house wasn't just my lingering grief. It was my duty. I had to fix this. I couldn't let my sister follow me into the dark. I focused. For the past 6 months, I had been an observer, lighter than air, unable to interact with the physical world. But I remembered the anger of one, the sheer willpower he possessed to control a body that wasn't his. If a fragmented piece of my mind could exert that much force, then my whole soul, driven by love, had to be able to do something. I raised my hand and pressed it against the bathroom mirror. I thought of Dad's ruined heart. I thought of Mom's endless tears. I thought of Chloe, my beautiful, innocent sister, tracing a bloody path with a crayon. Move, I commanded myself. Touch it. The air in the bathroom grew freezing cold. The mirror fogged up rapidly, condensing the moisture in the air. Chloe gasped, stepping back from the sink, dropping the red crayon. With all the strength I possessed, with every ounce of love and desperation in my spirit, I dragged my invisible finger across the fogged glass. It took immense effort. Every letter felt like dragging a boulder up a mountain. But slowly, Beneath Chloe's wide, terrified eyes, words began to form in the condensation on the mirror.
Enya.
Chloe froze.
Live.
I pushed harder, the energy draining from my spectral form, causing my edges to flicker and blur.
Ma.
Chloe stared at the words. She reached out, her small fingers touching the cold glass beside the letters. Lily, she whispered, her voice trembling. Are you here? I used the last fraction of my strength to push the red crayon off the edge of the sink. It hit the floor and rolled away into the hallway. Chloe looked from the mirror down to the crayon. A sudden, loud sob erupted from her chest. She rubbed her wrist frantically, smearing the red wax until it was gone, crying hysterically. The sound of her crying broke the silence of the house. Mom and Dad came running, their footsteps heavy and frantic. Dad arrived first, leaning heavily on his cane, with Mom right behind him. Chloe, what's wrong? Are you hurt? Mom dropped to her knees, inspecting Chloe's hands, her face panicked. Chloe threw her arms around Mom's neck, burying her face in her shoulder. I don't want to sleep in the water, she wailed. I want to stay. Lily said I have to stay. Dad froze. He looked up, his eyes locking onto the bathroom mirror. The condensation was fading, but the words were still clearly visible.
No. Live. For me.
Dad's cane clattered to the floor. He fell to his knees beside Mom and Chloe. He reached out with a trembling hand, touching the glass where my words had been written. The coldness of my presence still lingered there. Lily, Dad choked out, tears instantly flooding his eyes. Mom stared at the mirror, her breath catching in her throat. She pulled Chloe tighter against her chest, her hands shaking as she touched the fading letters. I floated behind them, utterly exhausted, my form barely visible now. But for the first time in months, I felt peace. Mom, Chloe sobbed into her sweater. Lily doesn't want me to be sad. She wants us to live. Mom buried her face in Chloe's hair. And for the first time since my death, the sound that came out of Mom wasn't a hollow wail of despair. It was a release. It was the sound of a dam breaking, washing away the toxic, festering guilt that had been poisoning her. I know, baby. Mom wept, kissing Chloe's head fiercely. I know.
She's right. She's right.
Dad wrapped his arms around both of them, pulling them into a tight, desperate embrace on the bathroom floor. The very place where their world had ended was now the place where it was beginning again. We're going to live, Dad promised, his voice thick with tears but layered with a newfound, ironclad resolve. We're going to live for her. We're not going to waste the fight she fought for us. I promise you, Sarah. I promise you, Chloe. I'm so sorry I gave up. I'm so sorry. Me too, Mom sobbed, clinging to Dad's shirt. We're going to be okay. We have to be okay. I stood over them, watching my broken family finally hold each other. The heavy, suffocating darkness that had filled the house for 6 months began to lift, replaced by the faint, fragile light of dawn breaking through the bathroom window. I knelt down one last time, wrapping my fading arms around the three of them. I love you, I whispered. I'll always be with you. 5 years later, the graveyard was quiet, bathed in the warm, golden light of a late spring afternoon. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, dropping pale pink petals onto the lush green grass. A tall, bright-eyed 11-year-old girl walked up to a polished marble headstone. She carried a bouquet of bright yellow sunflowers and a small, colorful cardboard box. Hey, Lily, Chloe smiled, her voice clear and cheerful. She knelt down, placing the sunflowers neatly against the stone. Sorry we're a little late today. Dad's heart checkup took longer than expected. The doctor says he's doing great, though. His new diet is really working. He even went jogging yesterday. Behind her, Mom and Dad walked up the gentle hill, holding hands. Dad walked without a cane now. His hair was completely silver, but his face was healthy, and the heavy sorrow that used to weigh down his shoulders had been replaced by a quiet, gentle peace. Mom looked beautiful. She had started a support group for parents of children with severe mental illness, dedicating her life to making sure no other family felt as isolated as ours had. They stood behind Chloe, smiling down at my grave. Happy birthday, sweetheart, Mom said softly, touching the top of the headstone. Brought you something, Chloe said, opening the cardboard box. Inside was a massive, incredibly detailed slice of chocolate fruit cake covered in strawberries and thick frosting. Mom let me bake it this year. I made sure to add extra sugar, just the way you liked it. She placed the cake carefully on the grass. I got an A on my science project, Chloe continued, chatting away as if I were sitting right next to her. And I'm doing a study on the brain. I want to be a psychiatrist when I grow up. I want to help kids who have loud voices in their heads so they don't have to be scared anymore. My spirit, glowing with a soft, warm light, sat on the edge of the headstone. I looked at my little sister. She was so big now, so incredibly strong. She hadn't let my tragedy break her. She had let it forge her into someone beautiful. Dad placed a hand on Chloe's shoulder. Your sister would be so proud of you, Chloe. We both are. We love you, Lily, Mom whispered, leaning her head against Dad's arm. We miss you every day. But we're okay. We're keeping our promise. I stood up. The tether that had kept me bound to the earth for 5 long years was finally gone. There was no more guilt, no more fear. Even the memory of one had dissolved into nothingness, leaving only the pure, unbroken essence of who I truly was. I looked at the blue sky above, feeling a gentle, irresistible pull upward. I turned back to my family one last time. I pressed a ghostly kiss to Mom's cheek, then Dad's, and finally, I leaned down and kissed Chloe's forehead. She paused, closing her eyes as a soft, warm breeze ruffled her hair. A small, peaceful smile touched her lips. Love you too, Lily, she whispered. I smiled, letting go of the earth, and stepped backward into the light. I wasn't a burden anymore. I wasn't a tragedy. I was just love, echoing eternally in the hearts of the people who stayed behind. And as I faded into the brilliant, boundless white, for the first time in my existence, I was truly, completely free.